Thanks for joining us. I'm Maddie Jansen. We begin with that breaking news out of Fresno and the federal courtroom there, where disgraced former Bakersfield police officer Patrick Mara was just sentenced to 5 years in prison, despite a recommendation of a sentence more than 5 times that long from the U.S. attorney. 17's Jason Galvin is live this afternoon in Fresno after just leaving the courtroom. Jason, what can you tell us about what went on inside?
Well, Maddie, things started dramatically differently today for Patrick Mara. He arrived just as we were arriving, along with many of the other media members here, about 9 a.m. and walked into this Fresno Federal Courthouse alone. About 5 or 10 minutes later, Assistant U.S. Attorney Brian Delaney walked in, and a few minutes after that, Mara's attorney, Fred Gagliardini, also walked into the courthouse. Now, once we were inside, Mara was joined by his wife, by his children, his parents, and about a dozen or so friends and other family members. And those friends and family members that joined Mara, that's significantly less than the amount that joined Demasio Diaz. And ultimately, Patrick Mara, sentenced to 5 years in prison, is exiting the courtroom right now, actually, with his attorney, Fred Gagliardini. We're going to see if Mr. Mara is going to take a statement and try to take this live here as he walks out, and it appears he is going to talk to us. So we will turn things over to Patrick Mara and his attorney, Fred Gagliardini.
Again, I want to take this time to publicly apologize to the Bakersfield Police Department, all of my former colleagues who I disgraced and shamed their badge and uniform. I'm ashamed of my actions, ashamed of myself. Apologize to the citizens of Bakersfield for betraying the trust that they had placed in me, and I'd also like to, I guess, debunk some of what's been going on the past couple months as far as allegations of corruption and other officers being involved. At the advice of my attorney, I obviously have had to sit quietly and wait for my day in court, but the 5 or 6 guys that were off on admin or are still off on admin, they never had anything to do with any criminal conspiracy that we were a part of. They never got paid a dime from anything that happened. The only thing that they did was what they thought was their job. They were unknowing and unwitting participants in any of the stuff that happened, and they were absolutely in no way part of what Demasio and I did.
You're saying that none of your former officers in the police department that you worked with accepted any money at any point for any of the drugs that were exchanged?
That's correct.
There were some questions on the times that officers were asked to pull over certain cars. What did they know or not know about being asked to pull over a vehicle? What was their participation in those instances?
Those were typical of car stops that narcotics detectives would have patrol units do. I mean, we would tell them to stop the car and, hey, there might be this, there might be that, and show up, and you know, we would take possession of what was in the car.
So they had no idea what you and Demasio were doing?
No, they had no idea and didn't take any part in what Demasio and I did.
Patrick, your attorney sealed 3 documents in court from last week that were filed. Can you tell us what were in those documents? Was that something maybe debunking what you're saying now?
I'll answer that one. I didn't seal any documents. The AUSA, the Assistant U.S. Attorney, is required to seal certain types of documents and letters describing any cooperation that a defendant may have given in what continues to be an ongoing investigation, but not as it is directed at the Bakersfield Police Department.
Can you tell us about the third person involved in this ring that Judge O'Neill and the U.S. Attorney indicated today was a personal friend of yours?
No, I'm not going to get into any of that with you guys.
Mr. Mara, how do you feel about this sentence that you got today? You went in there not knowing what would happen, and so what's your feeling now?
Obviously, I've had a lot of time to sit and, you know, wait and sleepless nights, and as much as I'm not excited about the thought of being away from my family, I'm relieved to at least have this part of it over.
Do you believe 5 years is fair?
I know that I committed crimes and I have to pay for those crimes. So I'm willing to accept what the judge issued.
The judge spoke directly to your children, and I was watching your daughter during, I think, the time that your wife was speaking, and she was constantly dabbing at her eyes. What did you think of what the judge said to your little kids?
I don't want to talk about my kids and
I thought it was very sweet that he reached out to them specifically.
Yeah.
What do you plan to do before turning yourself in? What are your plans over the next month and a half?
Try and get my family situated and get them stable.
Do you have a message to the public at this point? You alluded to that, but I just wanted to give you another opportunity. You were there to serve the community of Bakersfield, so at this point, do you have a message to them?
I would say that the officers at the Bakersfield Police Department do a great job keeping you guys safe. My actions and Damasio's actions are in no way a representation of what we were taught or what we believed in or anything that's remotely acceptable to the Bakersfield Police Department.
In court, you said it was simply greed that turned you in that direction. Can you tell us a little bit more about
Actually,
that?
if I could correct that, actually
Yeah.
what he said was it was weakness.
Weakness.
The word was weakness. The judge said greed.
So you can, thank you, sir.
No problem.
You said it was weakness, so can you expand on that?
I mean, at that time in my life, I was, I don't know, going through a rough patch, and I folded to temptation, and now I get to deal with the consequences of those actions.
Ready to go with your family?
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Mr. Gagliardini, anything else you want to tell us about this case?
About the case, no. But I would impress with the judge saying that once your life gets distilled down and everything else is gone, all the chaff's blown away, it's three things that are important. It's God, your family, and your friends. And you can see what he's going through right now.
Are you satisfied with what your client received today?
Yes. Yes, I am. Considering the prior counsel he got from the lawyer before, I know you weren't up there, but there was a lawyer that had been giving Mr. Marra legal advice. And that advice, I think, worked to Mr. Marra's detriment in a lot of ways. It took away options that would have made today less painful for he and his family. And that's an embarrassment to me as a lawyer to have seen that.
Have you reached out to that counsel at all?
No, that wouldn't be appropriate. Thanks.
Thank you, Sue.
Fred Gagliardini and Patrick Marra there responding to the sentence again. Patrick Marra receiving the same sentence as Damasio Diaz, 5 years in federal prison. Of note, Marra will serve 5 years probation when he is released. Diaz was sentenced to just 3, and Marra is out on his own remand. He is due to turn himself in at the same date and time as Damasio Diaz. That's 2 p.m. December 5th. We'll have much more tonight on 17 News at 5. Live in Fresno, Jason Galvin, 17 News.
Detective Patrick Marra of the Bakersfield Police Department was sentenced to 5 years in prison on Monday for stealing and selling methamphetamine. Earlier this month, his former partner, Detective Damasio Diaz, was also sentenced to 5 years in prison after he pled guilty to accepting bribes, tipping off drug dealers, stealing and selling confiscated meth, and filing false tax returns as part of a plea deal. Prosecutors had been seeking at least 21 years in both cases, but Judge Lawrence O'Neill, who characterized it as a horrible tragedy rather than the purposeful crime that it was, instead used his discretion to make sure they got the traditional policeman's discount. Via BakersfieldNo.com. After the sentencing, Marra said he had folded to temptation during the time he was with the Special Drug Unit. And now I've got to deal with the consequences of those actions, he said. Mara's first comments were an apology to the police department and his former fellow officers. "I'm ashamed of my actions, ashamed of myself," Mara said. "I apologize to the citizens of Bakersfield for betraying the trust that they had placed in me." Kern County District Attorney Lisa Green said her office has reviewed cases worked on by Mara and Diaz while they were involved in criminal activity. She said her office will send letters to defendants or attorneys involved in 64 of those cases. Diaz has alleged widespread corruption within the police department, and 5 other Bakersfield officers were put on leave for investigation into allegations of wrongdoing tied to the situation with Diaz and Mara. No charges were brought against any of the other officers. Both detectives Diaz and Mara enjoyed some local notoriety. Diaz was part of a celebrated local cross-country team whose success in the 80s spawned a Disney movie starring Kevin Costner, entitled McFarland, USA. Mara, however, went for a much more ironic twist. 6 days before he got involved with Diaz's meth ring, Detective Mara was awarded the title of Exceptional Officer of the Year by the Kern Law Enforcement Foundation. Of course, if you've been paying attention to Kern County Area Police, you might be familiar with the sheriff's deputy who escaped after being arrested for going on a meth binge and threatening children. Or you might be aware that a chief in the Fresno Police Department was arrested for selling drugs. So, it's probably not that far-fetched that Mara actually is the Exceptional Officer of the Year there.